So now that Lincoln has kind of shifted the way that he is viewing the interpretation of the Civil War away from not just to preserve the Union, but also to preserve the Union and include emancipation, he is going to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And if we look at it here, we can see in an excerpt from it, he's saying that all person held as slaves to be designated as part of a state the people whereof shall be in rebellion against the U.S. shall be then henceforth forever free, and that not only are they going to be given their freedom, but they're going to be protected by the executive government of the United States, including military and naval officials, to maintain the freedoms of them. And so he's basically saying we will take military action to preserve the freedom of these newly freed slaves. And a couple of things to keep a note of, and we can see this if we look at the maps here. If we look at it, he's freeing the slaves, but he's also only freeing the slaves in the southern states or in the Confederate territories. So the states that he's arguing these freedoms for are in parts of Virginia, not West Virginia, parts of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, etc. However, there's going to be states that are omitted from this as far as the ones who joined who stayed with the Union, states like Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware, who were slave states, but however did not leave to join the Confederacy. They're going to be maintaining their slaves. They will not be a part of this emancipation, and this is going to give the North a new reason to fight. It's going to give them kind of a new motivation to free the slaves. It's going to be really one of the first times in human history where they are going to be fighting for the freedom of another people's, and the southern slaves are typically going to escape, and they're going to be escorted by northern troops, and some will eventually then join the Union Army to fight. And here we can see an example of a painting showing slaves from North Carolina who are coming up to the north, and you can see how they're being escorted by the Union military to make sure that they are free and that they will maintain their freedom as well. And from this point forward, Lincoln will also be known as kind of the great emancipator, or the one who freed the slaves of the South. And again, this is going to kind of give the North a newly founded motivation. If we keep going through with the battles here, as far as Fredericksburg, the Confederacy is going to win there as well, and Virginia kind of maintaining and holding off the Union militaries. And in some of these battles here, though, some of the Confederate generals like Stonewall Jackson are going to start being killed, and they are going to kind of starting to become depleted as the war moves forward. But after Antietam and after Fredericksburg, the Confederacy is going to continue to win the North battles and continue to win in the East, while the Union is kind of maintaining their stronghold in the West. So if we kind of try to take some conclusions away from the first part of the Civil War, the first half, I guess if you want to call it part of the Civil War, that even though the Confederacy is outnumbered, they are having far less supplies, far less manpower, they are being able to dominate most of the fighting, especially in the northeast part of where the war is happening. They use their effective defensive strategy. However, while the North is kind of controlling the Mississippi River and everything out west in states like Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, they're holding down the fort, as to say, in the western part of the fighting. However, what we're going to tend to see is right about that halfway point, because we're going to see kind of the midway point being the Battle of Gettysburg, that the North's population and the industrial power is just going to be too much for the South to maintain and to preserve against, and the Union will also have some success under the leadership of Ulysses S. Grant once he becomes the controlling general of the Union Army. So very quickly, we're going to kind of go through and look at some of the fighting and some of the technologies that are being used here during the Civil War. This is really kind of the first American war to be industrialized because of having our newly founded Industrial Revolution. And both sides, interestingly enough, believed that the war was going to end quickly. The South believed the North was going to give up quickly. They were not invested in a true war. And the North believed that they were just going to be able to overpower the poorer and more agrarian Southern army. So this commitment kind of leads to a total war, which we'll see, especially with an example. This would be Sherman's march all the way, destroying the southern parts of the Confederacy. And we're also going to take a look at here how this improved industrial weaponry will cause mass amounts of casualties and destruction that we have not seen before in American wars. Some of the first new weapons that are going to be created that cause for far more destruction is going to be long-range artillery cannon fire, which is a lot more effective and can also be a lot more deadly accurate. Is going to be used the Gatling gun here as well, which is pictured in the bottom right corner, which is the first machine gun, which is able to just mow down men across the battlefield, especially in the West, is going to be used very strongly. And even just rifle technology is getting better. Bullets are now being grooved as well to match the barrels of the rifles, so they become far more accurate than the muskets that we typically would think of during the American Revolution. The navies are becoming even far more industrialized. These ironclad ships and submarines are starting to be used. You can see kind of pictured here in the showing the North and the South here fighting each other, which creates new technology being used. Steel for the first time being used on the open seas. And these old tactics met with new weapons are going to cause for a huge amount of assaults and casualty rates that really American militaries, American wars have not seen so far in the past. And the new technologies of the camera are going to allow for people to see in newspapers and print what is really the devastating effects of these wars, and it's really going to be kind of the first time that's brought to people in their own homes. So if we take a look at this graphic here, it does a really good job of kind of showing just how far and how much more deadly the Civil War was as far as American deaths compared to any other war that we fought in our history. And we can just see it's not even close. That the Civil War has almost twice the amount of casualties and deaths alone of the World War II's. Almost 5 times as many as World War One, and then even more and more times deadlier than the other wars here that we have either learned about or will learn about throughout the course of the year. So this is going to end our first part here of the Civil War. We're going to kind of cap it here, and next time we're going to take a look at kind of the second half of the battles themselves and how is the tide changing, how the Union starts to gain momentum and eventually lead to a Confederacy surrender. So again, guys, make sure we come in with questions ready to go. We'll have a Q&A session provided with some activities in class to further our understandings, and I'll see you next time.